One major development going on now involves more to do with Rachel Zegler and her attitude towards South Park Studios and Paramount after learning about what they are planning for their upcoming special called the DEI Special.
The last time I had the dream, I was walking down the school hallway, and that's when I started to notice that something's wrong. Everyone I cared about has been systematically replaced. And finally, I want to scream, and I'm like, why are they replacing every single character with someone who is diverse?
What if one viral interview could wreck a multi-million-dollar movie before it even hit theaters? What if the backlash wasn't just online, but animated, brutal, and broadcast to millions?
Exactly what they're doing, and that is why we hate the diversity, equity, and inclusion casting and writing in movies. Snow White is the first American feature-length animated movie, 1937. It's one of the most beloved movies of all time. Even if everything worked perfectly, it would have been almost impossible for this movie to succeed because you're comparing it to one of the most beloved films of all time and a truly groundbreaking movie.
Disney thought they were remaking a fairy tale. Instead, they stepped into a firestorm, one that spiraled out of control the moment Rachel Zegler opened her mouth. From bold interviews to silent retreats, from Hollywood chaos to a savage parody that shocked everyone. This wasn't just a casting controversy, it was a pop culture implosion. And what South Park did in the middle of it, that changed everything.
Active involves more to do with both South Park Studios and Paramount, and what they recently did toward both Zegler and the Disney company for their Snow White film. It turns out that both Trey Parker and Matt Stone are already preparing for the DEI special that is set to serve as a sequel to the Panderverse.
Let's break down how a single remake became one of Disney's biggest nightmares, and how the internet turned a fairy tale into a punchline. It was supposed to be a win, a bold, progressive move by Disney to reimagine one of its most iconic stories for a new generation. When the studio announced that Rachel Zegler, a young rising Latina star, would take on the role of Snow White, headlines praised the casting as groundbreaking. She had just broken through with West Side Story, and the internet was buzzing. Disney was betting big. A live-action remake of a beloved classic, a diverse lead, and a built-in fan base. On paper, it looked like the perfect formula, but the excitement didn't last long. Soon after the casting announcement, clips of Rachel Zegler began circulating online. Not scenes from the movie, interviews. In one, she casually described the original 1937 Snow White as weird and outdated. She said the prince was a guy who literally stalks her, and dismissed the romantic plot entirely.
Our rights are on the line, folks.
The right to buy Cosby sweaters?
Come on.
That's the face.
And if you disagree with this sentiment, just hit the unfollow button.
You don't particularly see people who, look like me or are me playing roles like that. So it was definitely when it got announced.
White!
He wasn't a stalker, by the way.
Thing that was like trending on Twitter for days because all of the people were angry.
No longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White.
That laugh.
That is
Not gonna be saved by
You
the
wrote
prince.
it?
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can. The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Say it louder so your other eye can hear you.
Her tone, blunt, unapologetic, and to many, dismissive. The internet exploded. To younger audiences, her critiques made sense. Why stick to an outdated fairy tale about a damsel waiting for a kiss from a stranger? But for a massive portion of Disney's fan base, the ones who grew up loving Snow White, the ones who saw the original film as a cornerstone of animation history, this felt like betrayal. It wasn't just that she had opinions, it was that she was tearing down the very story she was supposed to represent.
Sure, you don't get to dictate anything. You don't get to dictate if a film actually happens. You don't get to dictate when it is shot, how it is shot, if you can ever speak about it to the public. You are simply just there to show up and say your lines and look the way they want you to look. God forbid a woman dream about true love. We're all just sitting around here, maybe I could one day. I hate men. I just want that screams Disney princess. Oh my god, I'm literally getting enraged. Once again, I feel like I'm back in 2022.
It didn't help that Disney itself stayed silent. No clarification, no PR strategy, just clips of their lead actress talking openly about how much she didn't like the film she was remaking. And the backlash was brutal. Some fans accused her of being ungrateful. Others called her arrogant. Memes spread like wildfire, comparing her interviews to villains more than princesses. And what made it worse, every time the topic came up again, Zegler doubled down. No apologies, no softening, just more bold statements that widened the divide. What started as a celebration of inclusivity quickly turned into a war over nostalgia and what it means to modernize a classic. The very identity of the film was now under attack, and at the center of it all stood Rachel Zegler, no longer Disney's promising starlet, but the face of a growing controversy.
Yeah, the entire film's about a love story. It's about a love story because that's what the point of the film is, and I'm sorry that chivalry in a man pursuing you is now deemed as stalking, which now it's kind of making sense why men are opting out of the dating scene.
I was scared of the original cartoon. I think I watched it once and then I never picked it up again. I watched it for the first time in probably 17 years.
But the public tension wasn't just between Zegler and the fans. Something strange was happening behind the scenes, too. Gal Gadot was the perfect counterbalance, at least in theory. Cast as the evil queen, she brought global star power and a certain icy charisma that seemed tailor-made for the role. And unlike Zegler, she played it safe. No controversial sound bites, no fiery interviews. In fact, she said very little at all. But that silence started raising questions. The two actresses were supposed to promote the film together. They appeared on red carpets and at press events. But soon, fans began to notice something odd. They barely interacted. No chemistry, no banter, just stiff smiles and distant body language. The internet noticed, and the rumors began. Was there tension between them? Had something gone down behind the scenes? Speculation exploded after a now infamous moment at a major press junket. A reporter lobbed a question about working with such a talented cast, and Rachel answered before Gadot could say a word. Her response? A strangely pointed comment about how not everyone shares the same creative vision, but we made it work. Gal Gadot smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. From that point on, appearances became even rarer. Multiple joint interviews were canceled, late-night TV slots featuring the two of them scrapped, a planned magazine cover pulled at the last minute, and every canceled appearance only added fuel to the theory that something had gone seriously wrong between the leads. Behind closed doors, rumors leaked, creative differences, on-set arguments, even a near blow-up during a reshoot that forced producers to step in. No one confirmed anything, but industry insiders whispered that the dynamic between Zegler and Gadot had grown tense and unmanageable. Gadot, for her part, kept quiet, never addressing the rumors directly. But silence can speak volumes, and in an industry built on perception, her refusal to defend her co-star was noticed. Some fans took Gadot's side, seeing her as the professional keeping things classy while Zegler stirred the pot. Others believed she was distancing herself to protect her own brand. Either way, it was clear, this wasn't the united front Disney had hoped for. The press dubbed it a fairy tale feud, but behind the cheeky headlines was a deeper issue. Disney was losing control of the narrative. The actresses weren't just promoting a movie anymore, they were symbols in a much bigger battle. Tradition versus change, legacy versus reinvention, silence versus outspokenness.
It was supposed to come out like a year and a half ago, and then we went after them so hard because of their variety of ridiculous sins that they actually went into full-scale reshoots on Snow White when we announced that we had a competitor.
First animated film that had the kind of Disney magic that had depth, that had absolute, it was riveting. And it's based, of course, on a Brothers Grimm story.
And right when things couldn't get messier, a certain animated comedy show decided to throw gasoline on the fire. If the Snow White controversy had been simmering before, what came next sent it boiling over. Enter South Park, the long-running animated show famous for taking pop culture scandals and turning them into razor-sharp satire. Just weeks after Rachel Zegler's interview clips went viral, the show aired an episode that took direct aim at the Snow White remake. And it didn't hold back. The episode featured a character clearly modeled after Zegler. Same look, same os, same fiery attitude. In the parody, she storms onto a movie set, rewrites the script mid-scene, and screams at studio execs for not being woke enough. It was absurd, exaggerated, and brutally effective. The internet lost it. Clips from the episode went viral almost instantly. TikToks racked up millions of views. Reddit threads exploded with comments like, "South Park just ended her career," and "This is exactly how she acts in every interview." Whether or not that was fair didn't seem to matter. People believed it, and in the world of public perception, that's all it takes. To make things worse, the parody didn't just mock Zegler, it went after Disney too. The studio execs in the cartoon were portrayed as terrified, clueless, and desperate to appear progressive. One scene showed them greenlighting a Snow White multiverse, where every character was recast, even if it made no sense. It was savage, and it struck a nerve. Suddenly, what had been a niche online backlash turned into full-blown mainstream ridicule. Late-night hosts began referencing the South Park episode. YouTubers broke it down frame by frame. News outlets started running think pieces asking whether Disney had lost its magic.
On the original production, I was scared of it. Oh, it was so weird. It was a stalker. Like, I feel like if you are taking on the most iconic Disney role ever, genuinely, like this was the most prolific Disney film, I feel like you should kind of have some sort of reverence for the original production. In addition to that, there was already an uproar about her being cast as Snow White because she is not Caucasian, she is a Latina, she is half Colombian, and so people were like, why were you cast in the first place? We just had a black Little Mermaid, now we're having a Latina Snow White, and she's literally called Snow White. This doesn't make sense.
And here's the real kicker. Rachel Zegler didn't respond. No tweet, no denial, nothing. Disney stayed quiet too. It was as if they were hoping the storm would pass on its own, but by then, it was too late. South Park had done what it does best. It took a controversy, cranked the volume to 11, and turned it into pop culture canon. From that point forward, Zegler wasn't just a polarizing actress, she was a punchline. And for a brand like Disney, which lives and goes by image control, that was a worst-case scenario. But the real damage was still to come, not from the cartoons or the memes, but from Disney's complete inability to contain the chaos. Behind the scenes, Disney was in full-blown crisis mode. Executives were scrambling, PR teams were working overtime, and Bob Iger, the company's seasoned CEO, was reportedly holding closed-door meetings to figure out how it all spiraled so far out of control. The strategy? Say nothing, do less, let the internet forget. But the internet doesn't forget. As the backlash gained traction, Disney quietly began canceling promotional appearances for the film. Rachel Zegler was suddenly unavailable for scheduled talk show interviews. A prime spot on Saturday Night Live pulled without explanation. Fan events quietly axed. It didn't take long for people to notice the pattern, and the message was loud and clear. Disney was hiding their own star, and that silence spoke volumes. It was a stunning contrast to how the studio normally handles its blockbuster releases. Usually, Disney floods every platform with behind-the-scenes clips, cast interviews, red carpet premieres, but this time, radio silence. Even official trailers were sparse, with voiceovers instead of Zegler's lines. It was as if the studio was trying to promote the movie without promoting its lead actress. Inside sources began leaking to the press. According to one report, executives were deeply divided over how to handle Zegler. Some wanted to support her publicly, fearing backlash if they appeared to silence a woman of color speaking her mind. Others believed she had become a liability, someone who could sink the film before it ever reached theaters. And through all of this, Zegler remained mostly quiet. That alone raised eyebrows. This was someone known for being vocal, for speaking her truth, and suddenly, nothing. Some fans speculated she'd been muted by Disney's legal team. Others thought she might be negotiating a quiet exit. No one knew for sure, but in the absence of answers, the rumors only grew. Meanwhile, Bob Iger found himself in an impossible position. Should he defend the film and risk drawing more attention to the controversy, or let it quietly release and pray the box office erased the headlines? According to insiders, even he didn't have a clear answer, and every day the company stalled, the story snowballed. It wasn't just about one actress anymore. It was about a corporation losing control of its narrative, a fairy tale reboot becoming a brand crisis, a billion-dollar empire being shaken by interviews, internet memes, and a single animated parody. And just when it seemed like Disney had reached rock bottom, things somehow got worse. Because fans weren't just turning on the film, they were turning on each other. And what happened next would crack the foundation of the entire remake strategy. As Disney ducked and covered, the internet lit up like a wildfire. TikTok, Reddit, YouTube, every platform became a battleground. On one side, people rallied around Rachel Zegler, praising her for speaking out and challenging outdated fairy tales. They called her brave, progressive, and exactly what Hollywood needed. On the other side, a tidal wave of backlash. Memes labeled her snow woke. Comments flooded Disney's pages. Longtime fans said the remake wasn't just unnecessary, it was insulting. But it didn't stop there. People began digging into Zegler's past interviews. Clips were clipped, remixed, and reposted. Moments that once seemed harmless were suddenly framed as diva behavior. A joking comment about wanting to be paid for every minute of press time went viral. People claimed she only cared about the money. Others accused her of grabbing the role and using it as a platform to push personal opinions. It was a digital dogpile. Every day brought new edits, new jokes, new outrage. Hashtags like #NotMySnowWhite started trending. And in the chaos, a bigger question emerged. Was this really about Rachel Zegler or about Disney's entire direction? People were tired of remakes, tired of what they saw as corporate activism. Diversity for PR, not substance. And Zegler, fairly or not, became the face of all of it. Meanwhile, former Disney loyalists began turning their frustration into content. YouTubers dropped exposés. TikTokers made side-by-side comparisons of the original, and the remakes leaked set photos. Even neutral film fans started asking, what's the point of remaking a story you clearly don't even like? The mood shifted. What began as a Star's controversy had become a referendum on the studio itself. And while the internet raged, Disney tried to quietly fix things from the inside. But the fixes only exposed how deep the cracks really were. Leaks began trickling out, and they weren't good. According According to insiders, the Snow White remake had undergone multiple rounds of rewrites. Early cuts of the film had tested poorly, especially with younger audiences. Some executives believed the tone was too serious. Others thought Zegler's portrayal was too hostile. Whatever the reason, the solution was the same: reshoots, lots of them. Production insiders claimed entire scenes had been rewritten or cut altogether. One report said Disney tried to soften Zegler's character, removing certain lines that felt too confrontational. Others said a few songs were scrapped completely, classic numbers that had been reworked, then tossed when the backlash hit. But the rewrites weren't just about the character, they were about the message. Disney suddenly seemed unsure of what story it was even trying to tell. Was this a modern retelling about independence and strength? Or was it trying to play it safe and nostalgic after all? The result was confusion and chaos. Gal Gadot reportedly returned for reshoots, but with limited availability, her scenes were trimmed. Some speculated her role had been reduced entirely. Meanwhile, rumors swirled that Zegler's presence in the film had been scaled back, not just because of backlash, but because of internal disagreements over her performance. And the longer production dragged on, the more expensive the film became. Budgets ballooned, deadlines slipped, release dates shifted, and each delay made the film feel less like a blockbuster and more like a sinking ship. Behind closed doors, the stakes were clear. Disney wasn't just risking a box office bomb, they were gambling the future of their entire remake strategy. If this failed, the message would be loud and clear. Audiences were done with reboots, especially ones that disrespected the originals. And for Rachel Zegler, it wasn't just a bad press cycle, it was career-defining. Her next roles, her public image, even her ability to land parts outside of Disney, all of it hung in the balance. But despite the reshoots, despite the damage control, one question remained. With so many eyes watching, and not in a good way, the Snow White remake stopped being a movie. It became a symbol of how quickly a fairy tale could turn into a disaster. The film's visuals might be stunning, the music might be great, Gal Gadot might deliver a career-best performance, but none of that seemed to matter anymore. The narrative had already been written by the internet, and Disney had failed to flip the script. And worse, they had no one left to blame but themselves. What began as a well-meaning update to a classic turned into a lesson in how not to handle modern storytelling. Disney had cast a bold lead, allowed her to speak freely, then pulled the rug out from under her when things got uncomfortable. In doing so, they alienated both sides: the progressives who felt she was being silenced, and the traditionalists who felt their beloved story was being dismantled. Meanwhile, Zegler's silence, once seen as maturity, was now read as retreat. Her team reportedly advised her to stay off social media, but the absence only fueled more speculation. Every quiet day brought more jokes, more memes, more theories, and as the final release date approached, no one could say for sure what would happen. Would audiences show up out of curiosity? Would the controversy actually boost interest? Or would people skip it entirely, exhausted by the drama? Even Hollywood insiders were divided. Some predicted a box office bomb. Others said the backlash would fade once the film dropped. But one thing everyone agreed on? This was no longer just about Snow White. It was about trust, about branding, about a studio that seemed to lose its grip on what made people love Disney in the first place. The Snow White reboot was meant to reimagine a classic. Instead, it became a cautionary tale. A tale of good intentions lost in bad execution, of public perception spinning out of control, of a studio caught between old-school storytelling and modern-day messaging, and failing to satisfy either. Rachel Zegler stepped into the spotlight to break boundaries, and she did, but not in the way anyone expected. Her story became a warning to future stars, future studios, and future reboots. Because in today's media landscape, it's not enough to be bold. You have to be ready for the questions, the criticism, the chaos, and when that spotlight turns sour, you have to ask yourself, was it ever really worth it?